to have contractions. And I'm like, yes, finally happening. So starting around like 5:30 in the morning is when I start to have contractions, and they're progressively getting closer together, more in strength and more frequent. I'm like, yes, this is what it's supposed to do. This is great. It happened like that for 12 hours. And yeah, and so they were like, okay, well, do you mind if we check you and see how you're progressing? Because when they looked at the monitor, what my contractions were doing is they were getting closer together. And I put on here that I had about 7 contractions that were lasting about a minute every 2 minutes, but then I would have no contractions for about 7 to 10 minutes, like nothing. But then when they started back up, they would be that 1 minute every 2 minutes, getting shorter and stronger. And so like I was progressing, but there were these weird just 7 to 10 minutes of no contractions. And then when they started back up, it was like they started where they stopped. And so they suggested, they were like, okay, your body might be tired. Your body might not be used to this. So you might consider the epidural just to, let your body relax and get things going. And I was like, I really don't want the epidural. What else can I do? And they're like, well, we could do like a shot for you, like in the butt and hip area. And I was like, yeah, let's do that. So, and then like 2 hours later, they checked again, and I had like not dilated one bit. So this was like 14 hours of contractions, and I just was not progressing. And so I was like, okay, baby needs to come out. The water did break. Let's get the epidural, like let's just do it. If it's gonna help bring this baby out, I don't mind getting it. At that point, like the pain was not too intense. Like I could breathe through them. I was using my breathing techniques. I was, in it. And I was like, I could probably do this. It was painful, but I was still in that mind frame of this is not so painful that I need the epidural. But I did get the epidural so that I could dilate, because my body just was not dilating. And I didn't know why, and I wanted the baby out. So I was like, okay, epidural. So what they do with the epidural, at least what they did with mine, is it was a catheter. And I know that for some of my sisters, their epidural was like a shot in the back. It was like a spinal block or something like that, and they weren't like hooked up to anything. But how they did my epidural was it was attached to a catheter. And so I had to sit up, and in between the contractions, which another thing, the anesthesiologist came in, and he was so nice. He was like, okay, can't imagine what you're going through, but we're gonna try to time it between your contractions. And I was like, great, good. So we get up there, he's like, okay, I'm here. And I'm like, one's starting. And so he's like, okay, we'll hold off. And then I was like, okay, that one's over. And he's like, okay, let's go. Just breathe in, breathe out. And he stuck it in. It was actually not that bad. Like, not that bad at all. I thought it was going to be like horrible because of all the horror stories that I hear from like other birth stories and my sisters. And I was like, okay, that was not bad at all. Like, I've had tattoos that hurt worse than this. So puts in the epidural. They give me like this little, looks like one of those like bomb thingies. Anyways, so they give me that, and I can kind of up the epidural or something like that. Anyways, and so I'm set with the epidural. 5 hours go by. I'm able to get some sleep. And at this point, it's like midnight, 1 a.m. on Tuesday. So all of Monday, I was like laboring through contractions, like the entire day. And so they gave me the epidural. I was finally able to sleep for like 5 hours. And come midnight, 1 a.m. on Tuesday, my dilation went from a 3 to a 6. I was so happy at this. But the epidural stopped working on my left side. So I was feeling contractions on my left side, but not on my right side. And it caused my butt to have a Charlie horse. You know, like how your toes and your foot, like you get that muscle spasm, and they go all wonky and it hurts really bad. Just imagine that in your butt, but just one cheek. So that happened, and that was really painful. So my doctor is like massaging my butt out. So she brought the anesthesiologist back in, and he was like, okay, there's 2 things we can do. Well, actually, there's 3 things we can do. We can do nothing. We can not take the needle completely out, but just kind of replace it because maybe it got moved. Or we can take the entire thing out and redo the entire epidural. He's like, and this all has to be done during contractions. And I was like, okay, well, just try to replace it. And so, or like readjust it. So they sit me up, I'm over, and he's, you know, fiddling around, not too bad. And it starts to work on my left side. So I'm like, okay, good, that's probably what it was. Well, it just stops working altogether. So I am now in the throes of contractions, feeling it all after not feeling like the middle part. And it's like excruciating pain. So yeah, I went through that for a couple more hours, just kind of going through, because I was like, maybe I can do this. You know, the epidural stopped working. I am dilating. Maybe I can do it without the epidural for the rest of the part, you know? And so I just kept doing like the mantra of pain is only a sensation and breathing. Pain is only a sensation and breathing. And I just kept going through that, just focusing on a focal point and just going through that mantra, doing my belly breaths and everything. But it did get to a point of my body started going like started convulsing, because I was so cold and I just uncontrollably shaking. And I was like, I'm so cold, I am so cold. And so they like put the blanket on me, and I was like, I'm so cold, I don't know what's going on. And so they checked my temperature. I had a temperature, and they found that I had an infection. And so going back to the, like when I first got in and they were hooking me up to stuff, I tested positive for GSB, which is normal. And you just get a round of antibiotics before you give birth, right? So I was hooked up to it through my hand, which you can still see the bruise. It's quite sad. So I was hooked up to antibiotics through my hand, but the antibiotics for my infection couldn't go in the same port. So they had to put it in here. So I was hooked up in an IV here and an IV here, both antibiotics. Yeah, that was not fun. So I'm going through fever, I'm going through chills, going through, my epidural just stopped working a couple of hours ago. And so they had the anesthesiologist come back in and take the other one out and put a whole new epidural in. And so I had to sit back up in huge pain and not move. And he tried to time it, but my contractions were so close together that, you know, like once one went down, one was coming. And so, you know, he did his best, and he was so nice. And that one worked. I was able to calm down. The antibiotics started working, so my fever and chills went down, and I was able to sleep and to relax and to progress. 8 o'clock, I woke up, and Anthony's there. Everyone's there. I'm feeling okay. My body is kind of exhausted. And the doctor comes in and she's like, hey, good morning. How are you feeling? Do you mind if I check you? You know, it's been quite a while. You were dilated at a 6. Let's see where you are now. And I was like, yeah, go for it. And so she goes down there and she checks and she goes, oh, it's time to push. So I was dilated to a 10 and it was time to push. And I was like, yes.